Hi, David.
Hi,
Hi, how's it going?
good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Have you sat through any of our FutureFeed training sessions?
I have not gone through any of your future feed sessions.
Okay, cool. And so this one here is being recorded, and it looks like it's just you and I. There was a couple other folks registered, but we can get started.
Okay.
My name's Rachel Leidy. I'm the director of compliance education here at FutureFeed. Fairly new to the company, started 6, 7 months ago, and I'm actively working on improving our user education content and some content about the compliance of CMMC in 171.
Well,
Okay,
it's good to see you again. We met in Dallas
I was
at
gonna say
the
you look familiar.
yeah we
That's
met
like,
at the CMMC conference at SMU.
okay, okay. You were in the
I was
course?
with a different company. Well, actually, I had just been laid off.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh yeah, Dallas, Texas. Did you go to the golfing afterward?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we talked there.
Okay, that's where it is. That's always like I asked you if you've done training before because I knew your face looked familiar. Okay, so
But
this
now I'm with Summit Seven,
oh nice.
uh,
Okay.
and obviously they're heavily dependent on future feed
Yeah.
for their assessment activities. So
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and so you can see my screen sharing future feed.
yep.
Okay. So just start by saying that this session is being recorded. So as soon as I end the call today, about an hour after I end it, you'll get a link to today's recording.
Okay.
And it is open, so if people may join here in a little bit. What else do I want to say? That this is training session number 1 for service providers. As I'm aware, Summit 7 is a service provider. So there are 2 training sessions. After you're done with this one, whenever you feel ready to learn another chunk of information about FutureFeed, then you would sign up for the second session. It's I'm sure you can find it because you obviously registered for this class, but just so you know,
Yeah.
sign in, scroll to the bottom, and then there's the registration page. And are you aware of the 15 minutes with future feed session? Okay,
Yep.
cool. So, then let's just get started. Other educational resources to you. We have started working on these getting started guides here. So every page of future feed is going to have a getting started guide, and these are like built-in user manuals, and the information in them, it depends on what page you're in when you click on it. So here I'm going to be showing you the worksheets. What is a worksheet and why does it matter and how to add a worksheet, that type of stuff. So the getting started guides refer to those. They're different for every page. And then, hold on, I gotta move this Zoom menu out of the way. Up here under the user settings, we have a help center. Here's where we post all of our knowledge base articles. Okay, you do have to log in to get access to the whole suite of documentation there. So just try to remember to log in. You will have to create an account when you first visit this site, and then it's free. It's just where we host our articles. So that's
Okay.
all of and then of course you can always sign up for as many of these sessions as you need, and I will be actively producing some more content and pushing that out and notifying all of our users via an in-app notification. Okay.
Okay.
So today I'm going to cover the dashboard area of future feed. I'm going to talk about the start area, people, tools, and documents. And then in the
Great.
second session, we cover the rest of the process, assess, SSP, POAM deliverables.
Okay.
And then just throughout, I mean, I'm aware you're going to be responsible for, using FutureFeed or filling out FutureFeed, accessing FutureFeed specifically for documenting your clients' compliance management efforts. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'll just mention a few tips and tricks along the way on how to manage multiple different compliance packages and show you some additional add-ons. I'm not sure if Summit 7 has them. You might have to check it out for me and let me know.
Okay.
Um, all right, so it's simple enough. The dashboard area, as you saw when I logged in to this specific environment, my dashboard is the landing page. I'll go back a step. So eventually, when you get access to multiple clients, environments, tenants, compliance packages, whatever you want to
Yep.
call it, each one of these is a different package. Each one produces one system security plan, one poem, okay? And
Yeah.
so you would see this and then click into the client's environment and then you land here on the compliance dashboard.
Yeah. It took me a while to figure out what that two building icon meant.
Oh yeah. um Pretty straightforward here what's happening and just play around with it. You can drill down of level up to sections of the S. So also in this dashboards area, you have an assessment prep center. Okay. All of these line items are a page or a section in FutureFeed. So I think I'm going to use this contract manager one for an example. So to get to the page, you can find it up here. There's contract manager right there. But I could click on this hyperlink. It brings me to the page. This compliance review checkbox thing here, this is the data that relates to that other page. So here is where I could, this is the contract manager page. So I would probably assign it to someone at the client's company who knows contract management or have them assign it to that person. But you would want to assign that section to someone so they could, either fill out that information or review the information for accuracy or get it approved. So all of these pages, look, if I go over here to data inventory, I'm going to set for my CUI, I'll set my Jeff. Over here under FCI, I can set someone else because maybe, you know, different person, different type of information. So all of these things, if I go back to that assessment prep center, is where you're going to now see that my activity there. So this assessment prep center is just looking at all of those compliance review boxes on all of the pages that it has, that has that. So you could assign things here or just check on the overall status of, the information in future feed or how accurate it is, if it's been approved, that type of stuff. We called it assessment prep center because whenever you move into an assessment or whenever your clients move into an assessment, you're going to want them to review the content in future feed because that is building out their system security plan and it's building out that body of evidence that they need. Um, okay, and addresses the requirements, all that stuff. Um, Critical dates is another project management tool area, just planning for the whole CMMC process from preparing to getting an assessment to if you had an assessment, you have 180 days to remediate and then get certified and you got 3 more years and when do you have to start prepping that. So you would work with, the client or tell them about this page and they could use it to plan that whole project for CMMC. Then we're still in the dashboards area. You have two screens to view responsibility. So I'm sure you've seen if you've played around in FutureFeed a little bit, but multiple areas, all throughout FutureFeed, you can assign responsibility for things. You can create tasks and you can create poem items. And so You can view what people have assigned to them. You can see what anybody in your company. Here's Pam's assignment. If I want to go to myself, I can just click back on individual user or switch it to myself here. Um, And then there's my racy assignments, tasks, poems. And so I would expect anybody, all of your clients who are like actively engaged in your compliance management efforts would be a process would be them for to log into FutureFeed at least once a week and just review this section to see their listing of responsibilities or tasks. You can use FutureFeed yourself as the service provider, use the task function or the chat room function capability to communicate with your clients, especially for task and activity you want them to get done. So that way, all that activity of communication and task completion and assignment is done in future feed for auditing purposes, and the evidence will then come along.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, all right, so that's the dashboards area. Um, Start. So this is for where you're going to start working with your client to, identify the company and the system. You can see contracts, data inventory, and some settings. So this is a lot of, high level compliance management data in this start section. You can see we're pulling some of this data start building out that the top portion of the system security plan that talks about the company and the system and all that. Um, so company info, pretty self-explanatory, right? Company logo, addresses, all that stuff. Down here, it's up to you if you guys are gonna use it for, or I guess it's up to seven if you guys are using this area for some clients. I've seen it where, some people don't use this, some people do use this, and they find it helpful. It just depends what your goal is, but, um,
What does
it's
it
a
do?
place. Well, it's just to track, so you would work with your client to identify their approach to handling risk, you know? Um And then where you factor in this information is when planning remediation efforts within your system poem.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Company description, same, pretty self-explanatory up here. So I want to show you that this little asterisk here, whenever you see a field and it has that little asterisk by it, that means that that field is being pulled to populate the system security plan. So this information will be in the SSP, like annual revenue. I will say I'm me personally, when I write system security plans back in the day, I didn't include annual revenue into my system security plan. So um you'll see things like that in future feed where maybe your client doesn't want to include certain things into their SSP, and they do wanna leave some stuff in, they don't wanna add some stuff like this one, or sometimes people don't focus so much on the employee count because that may change, right? Um, and so all I'm trying to get at is for that client, just let them know they're gonna have to either leave this blank, okay, and then when you generate your system security plan, that field is just gonna be blank, or they can generate their system security plan and then it's a Word document, so open it up and delete out the data you don't want visible in that SSP. Because maybe it's a SSP you're giving to an assessor and they don't really need to know the annual revenue of your company. So
Got it.
um and we are working on, the dev team is working on right now, the ability to filter what you want in your system security plan. So that's in the works. It's not out yet, but just so you know, it's in the works. Because you're gonna see a few other fields that you're like, should that be in the SSB? So all right, I digress. Also in this page, you also have the ability to track cybersecurity budget, where the client can use this field, and important cybersecurity insurance. Do they have it? What are the coverage dates and what does it cover? Um, so I don't know if you're involved with any sort of incident handling activity for clients or if that's a service, but you might want them to fill that out if you are. Locations. So just clicking on new location and log the locations, the physical locations for that client, or you can have them do it. Um, I would recommend having them log all locations and then opening up the location entry or inventory item, and then going into the compliance section to identify if that location has CUI at it, yes or no, or if it's part of your FCI boundary and it has FCI on it. So I'm going to go over the rest of these, like connect, task assignments, evidence, in a little bit when I get to the tools and documents section. But I just wanted to point out, like, after you create a location, open it up. And if they want to specifically, let's say you have a client that has 10 locations and only one location is storing, operating, or transmitting CUI data. It's up to you and it's up to the client. Do you want to log all 10 locations and then rely on this compliance tab to call out the one location that has CUI data at it? Um, it's up to you. I recommend logging everything and then using that compliance tab to identify what's in and out. And then with the tools, same thing. I would recommend logging all the technology, IT asset types at that client's company and using the compliance tab here to categorize if it's in scope of CMMC or 171, which is the first four categories, or is it out of scope? Um, and then you just call it out of scope. Why I recommend logging everything and then relying on this compliance area to further identify if it's in scope or out of scope is because some, personnel changes, this process as a whole, CMMC certification, it takes many months to get certified. And so if I make a decision today, oh, my one file server is not in scope, and I tell you, "Oh, I don't have any CUI data on that server." Well, maybe a year from now when I actually go into my assessment, and if someone asks me, "Oh, why didn't you include that server?" Well, I could pull up the inventory item for that asset like I'm doing here with this file server and see that it was categorized as out of scope, and then I could maybe review in my description, why the client said was out of scope. And then in the evidence areas where I would log evidence supporting that determination of it being out of scope. Evidence like the physical separation or logical separation type evidence. Your call, though. I don't know how Summit 7 does it. I digress. So back to the locations.
How, sorry,
Mhm.
with categories like that where there could be extensive data entry, is there options for getting the data into FutureFeed?
Unfortunately, no. So you're going to want to make sure your clients are very well skilled at knowing how to log assets and log documents in FutureFeed. Because it will be a manual, like keyboard, like take a few hours depending on the type of environment, how big it is, how many documents you got to log. But after they get them into FutureFeed, then it's just setting up the environment to support your compliance journey and continuous monitoring and managing stuff from that point on.
Okay.
Um, Locations, though, as you're probably aware, is where you do start to define your assessment scope. So, what are the locations? And then later on, we get into what are the assets, who are the people. All right. So, maintenance and ownership. This is just a high level description of who owns and maintains the hardware software that the organization utilizes. Up in the getting started guides in the compliance implications section, I've provided a little example maybe of how I'd write that up. It's what you see here. Scope, you're starting to define the system, giving it a name, unique identifier. Type is it? Is it program, enclave, enterprise wide solution? Um, CIA impact, for CMMC, keep it at a moderate or go up to an high. Um, Number of users, again, you know, these things may change and you might want to make a call if you want to use this function and try to maintain it or not. It will be fed into your SSP though, see. But nothing in a system security plan says that you have to identify the number of users. Like there's no requirement that says you must have a system security plan that defines the number of users. So, you know, that's it's your call if you want to include that. All
Okay.
right, system boundary and description, just defining what that boundary looks like, all the assets in scope, maybe at a high level, what's out of scope, and what's the purpose? What kind of business is it supporting? What is the line of business for the company? What's that data being gathered for? What's that end product? And then contract, okay, here's where they're going to identify cage code or cage codes because you can have multiple. If they have multiple, then just mark whatever that highest level cage code is in the whole hierarchy of things. Contracts, this is where you'd have them log the contract clauses that they have, specifically the ones calling out these DFARS or these contract clauses here that are driving the need to meet 800-171 or uh, pass a CMMC assessment. And so if you're working with a client and they haven't done any sort of scoping exercise, and maybe you guys are helping them figure out what their environment should be and what should be, what's in, what's out, then you might need to start talking to them about the contracts and where that data is coming in and where it's being sent. So all of that, you can start that kind of conversation using this contracts field and helping them first identify those contracts that have the clauses, um, and then follow that information throughout the environment. So data inventory here, um, here on the FCI page, it's pretty simple. You're just identifying your FCI assets because that's the type of assets you need to identify in a level one. And so you'll see I have all my tools and services listed out. And up here under tools, this is where I list out all my tools and services. So I do have to come in here and make entries for my tools and services. After then I log them here, they'll show up in that FCI area. So I'll have to revisit this page and then just, yes or no, does that asset store, process, or transmit FCI data? So these are the ones I'm saying yes. Here I'm saying no. And don't look at it for accuracy because it's not.
So
um,
the tools and services would include software, devices, and services.
yeah, up here under tools, this is where you log all of the IT assets and products to include, hardware and software. But mostly it's just major software that's storing, processing, or transmitting CUI data is what you would define. You may not identify Visio, but maybe you do. Companies can get that granular with it. But tools and services now, this isn't where you put the whole complete 100% accurate hardware and software listing that your clients will need whenever they have to do that assessment. You actually list um, out the hardware software under documents. There's a category called lists, and here is where you upload your hardware inventory and your software inventory. Over in the tools, it's just a reflection of that. Your tools and services should match that hardware software listing. But under tools, you're not, for example, if there's 10 Windows 11 workstations, I'm not going to log 10 Windows 11 workstations here. I'm just going to log it once. And because they're all managed the same, they all have the same baseline, they're, same purpose. Maybe if you had separate baselines and you had one Windows 11 configured this way for whatever reason and one Windows 11 configured this way, you could then create two different assets because you want to be able to um, associate them as being separately managed. The configuration settings are a bit differently, uh, different, all that stuff. But you do have to log the tools and services here, then go back to FCI and toggle on which ones are FCI assets and which ones are not. Then under the CUI inventory, a lot more information is displayed here. So you'd work with the client to identify the type of CUI they're handling. Okay. Um, let's pretend that you're working with a client that's doing export controlled research, uh, and they have that type of data in their environment. So you can just check the box, and that tells me or anybody else looking at that somewhere in this environment, export controlled research data is being stored, processed, or transmitted in this environment. Um, when the wrench shows up is where you've associated a specific asset. Okay. And remember, an asset can be a location, a, uh, an IT asset, or even a person. So here, like the CTI is being stored, processed, and transmitted in these assets here. It's got some backups, file server. Okay. If you want to get that granular with it, or you want your clients to, or they want to, what will need to happen. So, for example, I'm just going to click the checkbox here, and then I'm going to go to a tool and like find something that makes sense, like something that stores data. Come on. Okay, let's just say in Jira that we're putting it in Jira. Say Jira is a CUI asset, and now if I click on this CUI icon here and I scroll down to that category of data, so export controlled research data, and I click that box. Now if I go back to my CUI data inventory page, I'm going to see this asset Jira as being identified as storing, processing, and transmitting CUI export controlled research data, because I've made that further clarification in this compliance section here for the asset. So now if I go back to my CUI, scroll down, there it's not a checkbox anymore, it's a wrench, because if I click on it, I'm saying my Jira is storing, processing, transmitting this type of CUI. So it can help with defining that data flow a little bit. Okay. These do hyperlink to the NAR website. So if I take you there, you can see that this is how you'd mark it. So your clients will need to know how to mark that type of data. And you can see here what type of data it is. So it's specified or basic, um, which you'll want to know this specified or basic. So that way over here, you can check the right box, specified or basic.
Okay.
All right, data sensitive or sensitive data is just a place where your clients can, if they want to, maybe they want to track like employee PII, or they have some sort of other proprietary confidential data that they're looking to make sure stays in this secured environment, and they want to track it. So they can create custom categories for that, as you see here, and track that in the sensitive data section. And then settings, um, integrate with FutureFeed. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Integrate with a ticketing system. And so Summit 7, I know, has a ticketing system, but if you're working with a client that has a ticketing system and they want to integrate with them, enable it, then drop the email in there. When where you see this capability then is if I show you, if I go to the system poem, over here, looks like I need to zoom out a little bit. There's this blue envelope. So here I'm in the poem and I can email my ticketing system for this one poem item for whatever reason. Maybe I needed to do status update um, on that poem item to some management or to the ticketing system for tracking. Okay. And hit send. So if it's blue, you got it enabled. If it's grayed out, you can't click on it, then it's not enabled. Um, Poem goals. So you'll want to work with your client to define the default due date. Um, and you might want to align that with your defined remediation timeframes. So whenever in FutureFeed, if I make a poem, it's going to be populated with a date. I can change that date later, or at that time if I want, but it will be pre-populated and you control what that is here. And then scale, so you're going to end up having, a few different clients, I'm assuming. And what you're going to do here, this is a good section for service providers actually, because it just helps keep the different clients, kind of like level set the different clients. And if you need to refresh your memory for a client, because when I had a lot of clients, I would get some of the information mixed up sometimes. So, what this is, though, is where you're going to define what impact, effort, and cost is for that organization. So, for example, cost, if um, they have a poem item and they need to fix something, let's say there's a cost with it. Is $500 a low cost item or a major cost item for that company? Well, if you're working with a small company, $500 is probably, a low cost item. But maybe if you're working with a huge company, a prime or something, a low cost item for them, maybe $5,000. And so you'll just work with your client to, what is effort scale for them, what's impact scale, document that. And then how you'll be able to reference that information later is up here in the top right corner. There's this little ruler. So you can pull up what that scale was, what was it defined as with the client. So that, because multiple people can be working in the system poem. Maybe your client's creating a poem item for something, you guys create a poem item for something. Well, all of the poem items that created, they'll have impact, effort, and cost. And you want that to be understandable and read by everyone at your client's organization. So if someone looks at it, they all have the same understanding of what that item is. Um, okay, so that's what you're doing there. Then you have an ability to disable the FedRAMP warning pop-up. If your clients don't have a FedRAMP requirement, I would, say it's okay to disable it, but I would probably just always leave it enabled. Um, all right, so that's the start area. A lot of just high level compliance management information there, starting to define the system. Then you're going to want to work with your clients to start populating this people section. Okay, they need to identify the users or employees at their company who are involved with NIST 800-171 compliance. And you want them to identify any roles, security roles, HR roles, CEO, all those roles that need to be involved. And then you want them to build out and identify the teams that need to be involved. As a service provider, you guys have what we call the template subscription, where you've pre-built out a future feed tenant with all of the data and all of the information that you want all of your clients to have. And so when you guys bring on a new client, you just clone that one template environment, which has all that data in there that you want everyone to have, maybe some inheritance and talks about what Summit 7 does, and the CRM's already in there. Maybe you have pre-built teams in there because there's a Summit 7 SOC and a Summit 7 knock. All that stuff. Sorry, I'm messing with my hair. So that's um that's called the template subscription. And I'm pretty sure someone already has one pre-built. But I just wanted to point out, here's where you can start defining like the Summit 7 teams and the Summit 7 roles and the Summit 7 people that will be involved with all your clients, and make sure that those are added to the template subscription. So when every client's environment's cloned or made, that information's already in there. You don't have to go back in and develop that team again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And is that for assigning tasks and like how is the team information used?
So then, once you build out the users and the roles and the teams, where this information is used is when you have to assign responsibility in FutureFeed. So whether you're under a control, let's say you're under a requirement here, um, under a requirement, you have to identify the people responsible, accounted, consulted, and informed for this requirement. So here, if I want to add by team or an individual, over here I'm adding a role. I can So in order for me to identify them and tag them as responsible down here, they have to be entered into the system. Um, in that people section. And so but you can also associate. So here's a document item. If I open that up, you can see we're using that RACI model again. So who's responsible for maintaining and developing this incident response plan, which team or which member or role. Okay. So they do need to work on it. Takes some time to develop out this people area, but you'll want to create counts for everybody who needs access to that client's environment, and then log everyone else that by role and team that is going to be involved at some point with the requirements. Under this manage roles section, we have a default accountable role. So whoever I set here is going to be that accountable person under the RACI model for all my items that have a RACI model. Okay. And then under manage teams, I want to show you this populate button here real quick. So what we did is, how are we looking on time? Pretty good. Um, Let me go to this website here. I'm going to pull up the assessor's guide. Okay, 318, limit unsuccessful logon attempts. In here it says that an assessor could potentially interview person with information security responsibility or system developers or system and network administrators for this one requirement, which is limit unsuccessful logon attempts. And so let's focus on the system and network administrator. So when we saw that role, it's a role or the team or the responsibility. When we saw that defined in here, we created pre-built teams. So all of these teams here that you see, they're listed or called out in that assessor's guide. So if I scroll down, here's my system and network administrator team. And system and network administrator was mentioned under these 79 requirements here. So there's that 318 limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. Um, and so if you're working with a client who's just getting started with NIST 171 and they really got to just divvy out the requirements and start evaluating if they are implemented at the company or they're not, and start working on fixing it, you can use these bulk team creation here. And so you would create, for example, you'd create that system and network administrator one right here, and then open it up. and add the people that are part of that team. So maybe that client doesn't have any administrators and Summit 7 is that for them, or maybe they do have an on-prem admin or third party admin that they use, and so you'd identify them, you'd add that person to this team, and then you would ask that person to go start reviewing all of those controls that are connected, those 79 controls that are linked to this role of a system and network administrator. And where that shows up now is if I go to any one of those controls, um, let's go to 318 because that's the one was calling out. So if I go to 318, if I scroll down under interview, the responsible person, you see it has system and network administrators. So going back real quick, if I look at the populate, the system and network administrator team is associated with these 79 controls. And so they're going to be tagged as the responsible person or team in the RACI model under all of these 79 requirements. Oops. Um, all right, so that's what the bulk team creation or populate function is all about. So that's the people. Just think about everybody who's going to be involved in NIST 800-171 for that client and create for them a role or a team or even account. Over under manage users, you can create accounts. Um, if you're an admin, you can create accounts. If you're not, you can't. But this no access account thing here, what this is let's say I want to be able to tag Jackie on my HR team as being responsible for something in FutureFeed, but Jackie doesn't need access to FutureFeed. But I'm going to log her into FutureFeed so that way I can put her in a role or put her as part of a team or assign responsibility to her. That's what that no access is all about. All right. Then after the client builds out the people, then you're going to have them start uploading and logging the technology. So again, I don't know if it's Summit 7 doing it or maybe you ask the clients to do it, but whoever does it, just know they don't need to log for, like I said, if you have 10 workstations, you don't need to log all 10 workstations. You just create one entry for that workstation. Um, and yeah, think of the CUI categories like CUI asset or security protection asset, CRMA, specialized asset. Those are all the type of assets that you're going to want to log into FutureFeed or help your client log into FutureFeed. So to log it, they're just going to hit the plus button. Mission, defining what the purpose is of that asset. If it's a workstation, it's a workstation. But is it a firewall? Is it a multi-factor authentication tool? Identification and authentication mechanism? Um, that type of stuff. So just enter Entra ID, let's say is one that's in the cloud, hit log. So that's how you log one. You'd want your clients to do that. Note we're in the active section. So if I log something here, that means it's active. It's in production. We're using it today. If I log something down here, pending, that means I'm planning to acquire that in the future. So I want to put it on my system POAM so I can track that effort to purchase that tool or service. Same thing with documents. Okay, they have an active section. So signed, approved, in place, effective documents, pending, things still in draft and being worked on. When you create things down here, then they get put on the system POAM. If you happen to create something in the wrong place, for example, let's say that Entra ID, I put it in the wrong place, then I'll just open it up and it's showing an active. But if I want to put it on my system POAM, I'm going to move it to pending and then either set a due date by a date, or I could toggle it to the quarters if I like that, and select the due date. And then I just logged that on my system POAM. Just give it a second here.
So
Okay.
is mission a column that can be added? And
There's not, you can't add columns here, but if you open it up, the mission is I mean, it's here. So you can change it if you need to. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I'm just not sure how. Like it seems like there's a mismatch between what you enter and then how it gets displayed
Yeah,
here. So
so
I'm just confused about.
it should be this column. Um, should be the brand model. See how they call it brand model? So this is the brand model you put in. Is that what's getting you confused maybe?
Well, I was confused. I mean, mission doesn't show up here, and then yeah, brand model gets translated into product name.
Yeah. That's actually something someone pointed out yesterday. I never noticed that. And so I'm gonna submit that for a help desk ticket. I don't think it was intentional. And see if they can align those sections. So okay, so then after your client logs the tool, and this is what I'm about to say is true for documents too. So documents are going to be the same way. You're going to ask your client to log the documents. So is it a we're in the active? Is it an active plan, policy, procedure worksheet? Name it, and hit log. Okay. Right now I'm in working docs. If I go under reference documents, then I can log lists, diagrams, CRMs, configuration management. If I go under reviews, I can log those. Okay. So we kind of like created some categories so the organization of documents can happen. All right. But you're going to want your clients to log in here and make entries for the documents that they currently have in place, or that if they know, like if they happen to know at the point of time when you're engaging with them, because maybe they don't know that they need an access control policy, but after working with you, they know they need an access control policy. And so, um, if they know they need something, they would log it into FutureFeed so that way that activity can be tracked on the system poem and the document, and the evidence can be uploaded into FutureFeed.
Can you speak
Um,
to any file type restrictions?
I cannot because I've never gotten that question. So I will have to look into that. Um,
We
I
we
d-
record meetings in Teams.
yeah.
So I was trying to use FutureFeed to share meeting recordings, a MP4 file with a client,
Okay.
and
No.
I wanted to put it in the reviews and assessments category,
Okay.
but the upload would fail.
Oh.
But
Well,
if I included it as a working doc, as a I think as a policy, it went up fine.
really? Okay. Um, so both of those things have been noted. What you just said, and then the table header. I will. I have to write the second thing you just said because that's the first time I've heard that. So,
Yeah, just if there are general file type restrictions, and then if there are category file type restrictions, like it just seemed like
mhm,
MP4 was blocked for review and assessment, but was okay for uh,
for working docs. Yeah.
policy or yeah, working docs.
Okay. I'll note that. Um, and what else do I want to say? So if reach out to support at futurefeed.com if you run into any sort of issues like this in the future with things, or funky, the interface is acting funky or it's not doing what is expected. We're quick with answering our requests. And then also, if you have any recommendations for improvement of the tool, then submit those as well, the same way, support at futurefeed.co, because Mark, the CEO of the company, reviews those himself and decides if that can be a planned update or not.
Okay.
Um, so I'll have to create a ticket to get the answer for the file stuff, and I'll CC you on there so you can get that answer as well. Um, all right, so after they log the documents and after they log the tools, then next process should be to open them up and start filling out this metadata. Important to get some responsibility, some people, teams, or roles tagged in the RACI model so you can get that asset or that work beginning. Um, this connect feature here, this is where you're going to start associating the tools and services or the documents with the requirements. When you do this association, when you make this association, then if I go to this 3110 control, I'm going to see my file server under it. And I'll show you that in a second. So think of it as you're building out that client's body of evidence. From the requirement standpoint, you'll read the requirement in the assess page. You're going to read the requirement, and then right down below the requirement, you're going to see all of their evidence, all their documents, and all their assets that are being used to support that requirement. So you're building out that body of evidence in the assess page is what you're doing with that connect feature. Um, and I'll show you what it looks like in the documents here in a second.
What about
So,
that business process diagram?
oh, so this is describing the leader follower, um, the leader follower method. Okay, so what that is, and I'm going to show you over here under documents. I'm going to go to a document item and go to that connect field. Um, Let me go to a procedure. So here I have a vulnerability scanning procedure. And let me clear all this out. Link that. Okay. And let me go, actually, I'll show you by going to my vulnerability scan tool. So here's my vulnerability scanning tool. Okay. And let me close all this out. So I could connect my vulnerability scan tool to the vulnerability scanning requirements like this, and then it will build out that body of evidence. Or if I make something the leader, for example, this is just my vulnerability scanning tool. Well, if I connect my vulnerability scanning procedure, okay, then what will happen is see connected controls. Any controls that are connected to this document that I made a leader will bleed over and be inherited and show up here. So let me show you right now it's at 0, but if I
Yep.
go to the vulnerability scanning procedure, now I'm in that procedures inventory item. And if I connect the requirements here, let's do that one. And, um, maybe that one and whatever, you'll connect them all. So I connected them to my procedure, but I made my vulnerability scanner, see it right there, is a follower. Remember, because I made this vulnerability scanning procedure a
The
leader to
leader,
that.
right?
So if I click on that one now to switch over to that one's inventory item and go to the connect, it now is connected to those vulnerability scanning requirements. And so it's just a way to automate tagging. Okay, so think if you have a policy and a policy calls out some stuff, and then that policy has a procedure, and then that procedure has a checklist or maybe a form. Well, all of those 4 documents, you want them tagged to the requirements because that's all your evidence. That's the whole process and all the evidence of the process to the requirements. And so you just connect your policy to the requirements and then make the procedure and the form and the worksheet followers to that policy or make that policy a leader of those other items, and then the um, tagging requirements bleed down. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
So
If you,
is
yeah, if
that
I
business
make it,
process diagram link just to training or
yeah, it links to whatever documents or assets you log into FutureFeed.
okay.
Okay. Um, okay, so yep, have them open up the inventory item and fill out the RACI model, connect the item to the controls directly or by associating a leader. If you connect followers, they don't bring over any connected controls. So anything you make a follower is not going to mess with your tagging, your control tagging at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, then they should move on to compliance. If it's an IT asset, they should categorize it, or you would help them categorize it. Identify if it's CY asset, FCI asset. There's some other metadata over here they could fill out. Task assignment. So you're going to start creating tasks. Often I see the tasks happen a lot in the documents. So, for example, um, this I have a risk management procedure. um let's say in this one here, I want to make a task for my annual risk assessment and get it assigned to the person who's going to do that risk assessment and hit submit. And now that person's going to get an alert whenever it's due, whenever this is triggered. Hey, it's time to do the annual risk assessment. They'll click on the task. It's going to bring them right to this area so that if they need to look at the procedure document again, they can, but they'll have to close out this task. And to do so, it's going to prompt them to log evidence. So you can't complete activity without logging the evidence in FutureFeed, which is great because you're going to need that for an assessment. So here, then they would take whatever the product of that risk assessment, so a risk assessment report, for the results, they're going to take that product and either link it to FutureFeed, if it's housed elsewhere, attach it, upload it, or even create some sort of new report if they want. But they'll have to do one of those three things to close out that task and mark it complete. They have to log the evidence. And so this task assignment, you're creating tasks for your clients to get things initially done. So, for example, if this procedure was still in draft, I would create a task and assign it to my client and say, review and edit this document, or maybe review and approve this document, whatever you want them to do. But then also, you're going to start creating tasks that support the things that have to happen throughout the year. So, under that vulnerability scan procedure here, I'll create a task like I did here. I created a weekly task. So now every week I'm going to have someone getting alerted, hey, it's time to run the vulnerability scan for the week. And then when they close out the activity, they log evidence of activity completion, and all of that stays and gets housed in and captured in FutureFeed for their assessment. And so that's the tasks. You'll create tasks for initial compliance activity, and then create tasks to support continuous monitoring and the things that need to happen throughout the year. And then when you complete the tasks, all of that task completed and the evidence that you uploaded is found in the evidence file, and your clients can add additional evidence if they need to, um, for an item. And that's where we're stopping today. And then the next session will cover an assessment, SSP, your future feed, the rest of it. And so just get yourself familiar with those sections, and then when you're ready, sign up for the second training. Or if you do have a lot of questions, maybe need another run through, you can register for this class again, and then ask those, and we can work through them at that point. All good? Oh, I can't hear you. I see your lips
There we
moving.
go.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I'm fortunate to have a bunch of future feed familiar people to talk to, but this has
Cool.
been extremely helpful, and I will definitely sign up for the next session uh,
Okay.
in a couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Well, congrats on the new job, and I'm
Same
sure
to
I'll see you
you.
around. Bye.
Uh, I hope to see you presenting sometime soon.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe in CS5, which is in October.
Great.
We'll, okay.
All
Bye.
right, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.